Well, yeah, hello everyone. So many years ago, it almost feels like a previous life. I was working as a corporate lawyer for a large company full of engineers, and there was three lawyers and 2,000 engineers. I think the engineers found the lawyers very strange. So to break the ice, when I'd run trainings with the engineers, I used to tell a lawyer joke. So I'm going to share my favorite lawyer joke. In California, in the laboratories, they've stopped using rats to perform experiments on, and they use lawyers instead. And there's three reasons. One is that in California, there's more lawyers than rats. The second is that the lab technicians found they would get emotionally attached to rats. And the third reason was that there were some things the rats refused to do. Now, I share that joke. I think for me, it's less about lawyers. I mean, I've met some very, very decent lawyers, but about the legal mindset, which can, in a way, can tend to dehumanize both the lawyers and the people they look at. And I suppose I think that anything abstract and systems thinking, which I love, can get very abstract and can somehow leave out the humanity. So I think what I wanted to share today is a space and a framework to I guess invite back in the humanity and do it in a conscious way, which generally can be quite hard to do. It's sort of hard to talk about what does it mean to be human, what really matters to us. We talk about values, we find different language. So what I'd like to do is a mixture of do some exercises. I'm going to invite you to go into breakout rooms, and if you do, then switching on your camera will probably make it a more meaningful experience. And then you can always switch it off again if you like afterwards. So those who are asleep there, sorry about that. Yeah, so and then I'll share a framework which is backed by lots of research, and I can share some resources in case people are interested. So that's okay. And it would help if you can get either a pen and paper or something you can write on. It could be a screen, but a pen and paper is always is quite handy for this exercise. So what I'd like to do, and I'll give you a minute to reflect on this, just stop and reflect for a minute on something in the last week that you've experienced as being meaningful. Ideally in a work context, it could be outside, but just take a minute to reflect. There might be two or three things, but something, one or two things that in the last week have been meaningful for you. So I'll just give you a minute. Okay, so that's just about a minute. So what I'll do is I'm going to put you into breakout rooms just for 3 minutes in threes and just share what came up. That's the time. Okay. So you should get an invite, and I'll give you 3 minutes. So yeah, welcome back, everyone. I think so. Firstly, a question is, how did that feel? If you want to write in the chat or just unmute yourself and share how that felt. A thumbs up there. Another thumbs up, yeah, a few thumbs up. Chance to meet someone new.
Not something we get to talk about that often necessarily, Patrick.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? This meaning is something which it almost feels a bit awkward in a work context to admit that we're humans who need meaning. Okay, or nice, and there's a nice synchronicity about breakout rooms. Two people knew each other, so yeah. And the question that what's meaningful, it has different meanings for different people, of course. So okay, so what I'm going to do is it'd be really helpful pondering life and death. Yeah. Oh, and somebody was alone. Oh, I wonder how that felt. That's not nice, is it? In a lonely breakout room. If you can put in the chat or share just examples of what came up as being meaningful for you as an example. So I had walking the dog, which isn't exactly in terms of work, though I often think about work, but also a sort of a good call with a client. I had it helped to resolve something for me and the client. So if you can just type in a line or so, give me some examples, that would be really helpful for the next part of the exercise. Or you can, again, you can just say them out loud if you're happy to do that. Okay, so that's good. Feel good about the results of the US midterms. So meaningful growth from long-term connection with a mentor. Okay, learning from each other. Work-life balance. So, okay, I miss my wife and dog. I want to travel. So that's almost meaningless. There's a lack of meaning there. So let me. What I'm going to share is a whiteboard. Can you see that?
We can.
Testing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to populate that with, and this is, I must admit, I've never used a whiteboard on Zoom before, so this is very exciting. I think seeing my mother fall apart. Okay, so what's that? I think that's about. I'm going to put that in this section to all become clear. If I can just work out how to do this, text box, that will do. Okay, my mother fall apart. Being able to say a public thank you to the teaching staff at our local school. Ah, interesting. Yeah, so text box. Public thank you to teaching, bear with me a minute, teaching staff. And then I've lost the chat again. Chat with my new line manager. She was very pleased for me to join the group. Okay, nice. So I put that in. Line manager. Values me. Understanding people's views, I would not be exposed to my normal work behavior. Okay, I'd see that as here. Equals views. I'm just looking for one more type of.
Got to go for dada. Look at
that. I think I'm going to choose an honest exchange. Okay, so this is a basic framework, and I'm going to clarify this a little bit by adding in a couple of headings. So this is the top half of this is being, and the bottom half I'm going to call doing. And then this side I'm going to call self. And this side I'm going to call others. So this is a basic framework that's been developed over a decade or more, actually in New Zealand, by some researchers to try and look across in a cross-cultural way at meaning. And so you can see there's 4 quadrants and two halves and a top and a bottom. So the left-hand side is about the individual, the self. And that we often use the phrase integrity with self. So who am I? That's the top left. So that's being. So it's not an activity, not behavior. It's a being thing. And the bottom left is we say expressing full potential. So where you've experienced yourself in your finest, maybe you've achieved something, or you've created something. And I'll show. Now what you've so it might be helpful. So in the top right, what I'll do is invite you in a minute to think where your examples fall. Top right is about unity with others. So really listening to other people, understanding their views. Actually being with your mother if she falls apart, yes, it may be painful, but actually that experience of being with someone who's incredibly important to you, just that feeling of belonging, connection. Sometimes in an organizational context, in a work context, it's teamwork. And then the bottom right is service, which Gerald mentioned. So service to others, typically, making a difference and so on. So what we're going to do is we will explore this a little bit more, but so what I'm going to do So I've roughly placed them in those. I'm going to close this down now, and I'm going to share my screen with as I said, forgive me, for Zoom can be a little bit slow sometimes. Okay, so can you all see that? So this is the full map, and I'll just reduce that so you can see it. So this is the full map, being, doing, self and others, and in the center of the extra sections are inspiration. So what calls us, where do we feel we're, our sense of direction and movement in life, and then the outside is reality. So I'll just take you one by one through the different sections, and then we can explore it in a bit more detail. So the top left, being self, integrity with self. So maybe just look at that for a minute and just think, so what does that mean for me? Because people have different words. For some people, integrity is very important. For some people, it's meaning just being true to yourself. So can you just stop and think for a bit? Is that, what examples have you got in your own life? How important is that? Where does that show up? If you feel like sharing on the, unmute yourself, feel free, but we'll have a chance to share later as well. So I think for me, the integrity with self, it's very much about, I gave up my job years ago as out of worries of climate change. I could no longer hold together the working for a big importer of timber with caring about deforestation. So we all have our different stories, I think, about this. Going to the right, unity with others, teamwork. I'm sure we can all think of experiences we've joined with others and achieving something amazing, and just that feeling, that buzz of sharing, or even a failure, but just sharing with other people, just being with others, that sense of belonging, being in a powerful team that somehow achieves things and makes a difference, but you're doing it with other people. It's a different feeling. Bottom left, expressing full potential. That could be achievement, but it may just be doing an amazing piece of art, or actually just really listening to somebody, just doing something where you think, gosh, I've really shown up. I've really managed to call on my own inner potential and express that in a powerful way, which could be to help yourself, to help others, or just a creative act. And then the bottom right, service to others. So making a difference, somehow meeting other people's needs, very simply, can be very meaningful for us. So a couple of things to say about this framework. And as I said, it's developed over more than a decade by some researchers who've tested it among tens of thousands of people across cultures. What it gives is, firstly, it gives us a framework to be able to talk about meaning and what's really important to us as humans, which is very hard to do, actually. We're often not encouraged to do it. And I think particularly in Western society these days, the sort of the doing half at the bottom is often emphasized, less maybe the being. And that can certainly be in middle-aged. Children are much better at the being, and maybe the elderly are better at being, but the doing is certainly in midlife can go to extreme. So two more things to say about it. One is tensions are really interesting, and that's why it's useful as a map and not a linear model. Because, for example, if you're deeply in integrity with self, top left, that can get in the way of service to others, the bottom right. Equally, people who work for NGOs very often find them so much in service to others, they don't have a life. They work long days and feel guilty when they don't work, and they get burnout. So it's sort of predictable if you look at the map. The tensions tend to reveal that. And a very interesting, and I think one more thing to say is balance isn't necessarily the aim, but avoiding extremes, because if you're too much in being, you may not be achieving anything or showing up at all. If you're too much in the self, well, who are you in relation to other people? Where do you fit into a community? So, but you don't have to be right in the middle and balanced, but actually, avoiding extremes and avoiding too much negative of either one. Somebody talked about not enough time for family and life in work. So that might be in, a lack of integrity with self, or a lack of expressing full potential, or just a lack of being, just too much in doing mode. So what I'm going to do is, well, first of all, I mean, there's a chance for questions at the end. If you've got a burning question, share it now. But what I'm going to invite you to do is get a bit of paper and just draw a vertical line and a horizontal line. Or I mean, you can use this map on your screen too if you want to, but I find it quite powerful to write it for yourself, just to draw it on a bit of paper. And if you want to label it being, doing, self, and others. And if you want to switch the screen off, that's fine too. In fact, I'm going to stop sharing for a minute just to see. Yeah, so feel free, it's up to you. But just what I invite you to do is take a sort of 3 or 4 minutes for yourself, just to be with the map. And if you need me to put it back up again, just yell. And what I'm going to talk you through just different exercises on the map to try to give you a feeling of some of the dynamics and some of the tensions. So yeah, I'm going to share my screen again. Yeah, so we'll spend just a few minutes with this. So first of all, looking at the map as a whole and thinking about your working life, which is there a quadrant, is there a section of the map which particularly draws you, that you think, oh yeah, I really, for positive or negative reasons? So the integrity with self, is it, do you feel you're able to really show up in your work and it's really you're really true to yourself in work? Or maybe it's the opposite. Do you find in your work that the service to others in the opposite quadrant is really important? That's always been a driver for you in your work. So just take a minute or so and look at the map and see, am I drawn to a particular quadrant on the map? And then maybe try and exercise, and using your finger can be helpful if you feel so inclined. Try putting your finger on the map, maybe the one you've drawn, and putting it on the far end of being, so the very top of the map. Just put your finger on being and see how that feels in terms of your work. See whether you're feeling, how are you with being in your work? Just notice whatever comes up from whatever reaction. This in our Western societies particularly often comes up as being a challenge in individuals and organizations, or both. And then do the opposite, go to the bottom of the map to doing. Again, just see what comes up. What do you notice? And I'm going to get you to do one more quick exercise and just see what comes up. And we could do this exercise for hours. I've done whole days on the map of meaning, but I'm just giving you a flavor to see what you notice. So the invitation now is to, I'm going to stop sharing for a second, is to stand up. So you can, if you want to turn the screen off, you're very welcome to. I'm going to stand up. And just imagine where but you can do this, you can put your finger, if you don't want to stand up, you can put your finger on inspiration, the center of the map. But if you stand up, then just stand up and imagine you're in inspiration. So what's calling you? What's your sense of direction? What's sort of the destination you're seeking, you're feeling in you? And just be in that for a second, and then leave one foot in there and then put another foot to the side, and that's in reality. And you can close your eyes if you want. Just see what happens in your body. What do you feel? What do you notice when you put one foot in reality and one foot in inspiration? Do you notice any tension? Do you feel more comfortable on one foot or the other? You can stand on reality if you want and just feel what you're noticing that comes up. And just the invitation is to play with that, to notice, okay, this is inspiration. And then maybe back to reality. What's reality feel like? Is there a huge gap or actually a lot of alignment? So what I'm going to invite to do now is to go back into breakout rooms for 5 minutes and just share. And maybe nothing came up, maybe a very small insight came up, but just share whatever came up with you, whatever you noticed, whatever questions are coming up. And I'll give you 5 minutes just to share, and then we can and then we can come back into the group and share again. So so I'm going to go to breakout rooms. Welcome back, everyone. So what I'd like to do is provide a space now, a few minutes of questions, whether in the chat or just unmute yourself, maybe a short conversation. And then I can share some examples of how I've used this and people are using this in organizational contexts, and some resources. So
Sorry, I thought I was on mute.
So if that's okay, so maybe just in the chat or just unmute yourself and share what came up. It's annoying. Didn't learn.
I'll start. I'll start, Patrick, and obviously I won't reveal anything that came out because it feels like a sort of fairly private space. But I think we all went into it not desperately happy with the map, and actually all of us very quickly shared really quite deep, powerful things with each other. So the map, although we didn't like it, look at its impact, right? So that was very, very interesting, right? I despise your model, but it works, right? We didn't like the taste of the medicine, but it seems effective.
I like it. Thank you, Russ.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think a good reflection in our group was maybe the stage at life you're in and how much autonomy you have given what you're trying to achieve. And if you're retired, say, versus starting off your career, I think timing in the market always matters.
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. Yeah, I agree that there's definitely things I can feel myself moving more into being as I get more grey hairs. And that sort of the expressing full potential was something very important to me, and service to others. There's a shift to that as well, I notice. Yeah, thanks.
Joe, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, well, hi. So I have the fortune to be married to an anthropologist, and I think she would look at this and say, well, of course, exactly. But actually, we do all of these things all of the time, and they're all very highly interconnected. And maybe we can use this map to explore the pathologies that arise very easily when people's inner nature is at odds with the outer expectations, or vice versa, and their being side is at odds with their doing side, and so on. So I was just saying in the subgroup, well, for me, it all comes to a head on Sundays, because Sunday is supposed to be a day of being. You are not working. But my Sunday is full of about 10,000 things that are really urgently needing to be done. So in the middle of these 10,000 things, I say, oh, sod it, I'm going to go and play tennis, which is my game. So I go and play tennis. It's very, very busy, very physically demanding. But actually, while I'm doing that, I'm in a state of being. So I'll leave you with that.
Thanks, Joe. My thing is gardening, and I'm less and less able to distinguish between whether I'm being or doing when I'm gardening. So I think there's definitely something self-reinforcing, and there's a certain point at which you don't care whether it's being or doing or self or others. You're just being. You just are.
It's both.
But I think separating them out for me, it keeps my brain calmer to be able to see them separate. But the reality is they're one as well.
Mark, I think you had your hand up next.
Yeah, hi Patrick. I really liked the model, and I really enjoyed that. I wasn't quite sure if you said anything about inspiration, because there's a sense that inspiration is in the middle, but can the inspiration come from the self, the being side? Can it come from the other, outside? So it could be internally driven, externally driven, or a combination of both. So how is it in the middle, and how do you find your inspiration if someone is struggling around that?
Yeah, there's probably quite a long answer to that. I think the short answer would be that maybe some people would say inspiration holds the whole thing together. It's the North, in an organization, it's the North Star, if you like. And I find inspiration far more useful than purpose, which is very often turns into a doing, a place you've got to get to, whereas inspiration is much more connected with values and North Star. Where it comes from, who knows? I think what I find with the map, people often notice when they're just not clear about their inspiration, or the reality is so far from the inspiration, and that's just good information people to work with. But you can also do an exercise and say, okay, what's my inspiration in terms of, you know, how I want to live my own life in integrity? What's my inspiration in how I serve others? So it can be useful to go around the map and think in those quadrants, and then what's my reality in those four? So the map is very versatile in that it's sort of simple but surprisingly complex when you allow it to play out.
Thank
And
you,
then-
Joe. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Patrick.
William, you had a question too.
It's more of an observation, I think, in our group. You know, so we found the model useful in terms of discussing. And one of the key things I think that came out was there's a certain dynamic that one can apply to that model. So in one circumstances, in my work, I'm up here, but in reality, I want to be down here. And I'm in a period of transition, and I'm sort of in this ellipse, but I feel I need to go into this ellipse. So I think in that way, it was quite useful also understanding that dynamic movement, yeah, from one to another. I don't know whether.
Yeah, beautiful. And that's exactly, there's many coaches who there's a practitioner's training you can do with the map. And many coaches use it in exactly that way, because it's helpful to deal with emergence. It doesn't say you're wrong where you are, but it says, here's where you are. Are you happy with that? And you can also use it for organizations for strategic planning. So you start with inspiration, and then you move into each quadrant and say, you know, so it both applies at the individual level, but also you can use it for organizations to say, what's your brand? Who are you serving? And so on. So it is a very dynamic one in that sense. And you can see, gosh, actually, I really want to be moving more in the next year or two into the more being, more service to others, more integrity, actually, because I've been serving others too long. So it's very much helps deal with emergence. It helps you. It's a map and a compass, actually.
Yeah, so I think that was quite powerful, actually getting that emergent behavior from that model.
Yeah, no, that's very. I mean, I'm always amazed how I was never quite sure how much you can get from 45 minutes, because I've done the practitioner's training. I use this almost every week for sort of minor problem solving when I'm running a session or something. But it is I think it's been tested over, you know, tens of thousands of people. It's a very robust model, even if it's not, you know, it's a model, so therefore it's by definition wrong. I'm just checking. So we've got, I guess, 5 minutes, Tony, is that right?
That's right.
So, well, so is it worth me looking at the chat? Folding on the map onto itself, says Peter. Okay, that feels a bit Zen to me. Relation to others gives me meaning. What about connection with nature? Yeah, I mean, that's one of my themes. As I said, I mean, I gave up my corporate lawyer's job 20 years ago because of environmental concerns. So I think others we can use very broadly. Service to others is not by no means limited to humans. But again, that's the beauty of the map. You can, as Gerald might say, you can put your boundaries where you like, but there is an internal and an external thing as humans. And so others can be very broad.
I rather love the idea of folding the map. It gave me the idea that you could jump from one place to another, and that maybe inspiration was your sort of, you went through that as a nexus, but you could go from one place to another. Either it's an idea that the map is in a way dynamic, and your relationship to your states is dynamic.
Yes, I think in that sense I like that, as you said, because what I found, my experience is that, you know, the more I live in integrity with self, the more I'm able to truly serve others. So actually I can go way off one end and I end up like playing Cluedo, the English game. So you can disappear down one rabbit hole and pop up somewhere else. And definitely the more you can really, you know, really be in unity with others, you'll find you're expressing full potential. Yeah, the wormholes, exactly. Anyone else? Well, maybe one last question, then I'll wrap up.
I just want to pick on John's point about being a useful model for introspection. It's actually quite an uncomfortable model for introspection, because you can look at the thing and you go, oh, I'm not really very happy with that, or I don't like this, or I don't like this tension or something. it's useful, but it's a little bit uncomfortable being there.
I think to William's point, though, I mean, my experience has been, it just provides information and you can do it, on your own in a quiet room. And then actually information, of course, is power in a system, because you start to see, oh, hang on, I didn't know I knew that. And that's why sometimes the bodies, I often get people to do it in the body, because the body often tells us stuff that our head filters and doesn't want us to know. So sometimes if I'm stuck with a problem of any in personal life, work life, I'll put the map on the floor and just walk about and see where I'm drawn to be. And it sort of invites me into a knowing and it gets past the brain. Being trained as a lawyer, I learned to be very clever, which gets in the way of knowing things. The mind has to filter things and wants to grasp them. Well, I suppose, yeah, so I was going to just finish off by saying, firstly, uses for the map. I mean, personally, I use it for individual problem solving. When I've got something complex and I sense the answers within me, but don't know what it is, I can put the map on the floor or just sketch it out. It's an amazingly powerful coaching tool. I've used it for coaching leaders of organizations who are trying to work out what's important to them, where to go. You can run whole strategy days based on inspiration, what's your brand, who you're partnering with, and so on. So it can be very, what's your fullest potential. So you can use it for individuals and organizations. Yeah, and in a way, just to have with my wife, say, if I want a proper conversation about things, or with a friend, it gives you a sort of a language and a framework and a way of talking about stuff that matters to us that we aren't taught at school, and we aren't certainly encouraged at work in general. So to say what really matters to me, and actually, if you study the people who survived the concentration camps, I think his name was Viktor Frankl. He said the ones who found meaning, they were the ones who survived. And so actually this meaning is what makes everything bloody tick, as us humans at least. And yet we don't know how to talk about it, and that creates tensions. So one more thing. So there is a really good book, and I don't recommend books lightly, but I found this some really, really, really bright, thoughtful, meaningful practitioners in New Zealand, a couple of wise elder women, researched this, wrote it up, and I recommend this to any sort of practitioner working with organizations to try and get to the heart of what matters to us. So the map of meaningful work by Lips, Uesmanas and Lanny Morris. I don't get any royalties for this, by the way. I'm a certified practitioner, but I guess I'm quite passionate about the work. If anybody's interested, and I'll just I'll share a screen for a second. Yeah, so there's hang on, I'm going to share my screen just for a second. So that's the further reading. There's a Map of Meaning is a not-for-profit, Map of Meaning International, which promotes this. They do really good practice. They do really good one-off professional development sessions, which are worth getting on their mailing list. And then there's the book I mentioned. And then if you've got any questions of me, that's my email address, Barefoot Lawyer. So there you go. So that's all I've got for you.
Thank you so much, Patrick. That was really interesting. Quite different from sometimes some of the stuff that we do. We don't often necessarily go into this level of introspection, but it's an interesting place to go. And it gives us something different than what we otherwise might do. So I've very much valued that. Thank you so much. Very much appreciated.
Well, really very welcome. And thanks for having me.
Thank you. At this point, I'm going to just draw the general proceeding to an end. But I will say that if anyone wants to hold on for another 30 minutes or so, I will leave the bridge open, so you can have a sort of later in the bar, in its metaphorical sense, discussion. And anyone wants to hold on for that, I'll just hold on for a minute and hand the chair over to someone. But to everyone else, if you want to go, you can go. If you want to stay and have a little bit more discussion, you are very welcome to do so, and just network as you see fit. So thank you so much. Closing the proper meeting at this point. Thank you for joining.